Okay, so as you heard, my name is Annie Cushing. I'm on Twitter at Annie Cushing because I'm a data person and I lack creativity. And today I am going to be talking about the dark side of dashboarding. So, I mean, it's traumatic because that's just what I do, it's who I am. But it's traumatic intentionally because my experience has been, like, I have a dashboard course, I teach a lot of marketers dashboarding. And through doing that in the past year, and I also did some seminars and stuff, I'm really kind of I got to get out amongst other marketers and see their processes. I've done on-site training for companies and get inside their processes, and now I'm in-house with Your Tango as their VP of marketing and still blog at Analytics. But now I'm working inside a team, and when you actually get out among people and get into their processes, you find out that a lot of the stuff that we talk about in these conferences, it's like the unicorn plan. You know, like you come and you hear about like all these cool ideas and you walk away and you're like, yes, I'm gonna do that, you know. But then the reality is you go back to your well-worn paths because it's what you're comfortable with. And so I'm gonna address some of those things because typically when I talk about dashboarding, here's where I start. So this is the dashboard that my students learn in the course, and this isn't like a plug for it. I don't care if any of you take the course, but this is normally what I start talking about because I want to inspire people. I want to get them fired up, you know, like, okay, here are some of the things that you can do. I'll even show them like a dashboard like this that I built out specifically for the course. And you see here, 15 widgets. But if you can see, up in that corner, there's a drop-down with 9 options. Those are the channels that you see in Google Analytics. In the channel, it replicates the channels report, which, by the way, is it? Yes, it's my favorite report in Google Analytics. It just came out in 2013. Everyone should be using the channels report. It's under acquisition. It's at the top. It's like acquisition, whatever the first option is, and channels. And it just came out in 2013. And basically what it did is it took the medium dimension, which is so full of junk for anyone who has dabbled in campaign tagging, and I have a whole guide on campaign tagging and how to clean up your nasty campaign tags. But the medium dimension is just garbled with all of these tests and that really, really bad data, and the channels report like cleaned that up. And so this entire dashboard can be segmented by a channel. So all of these widgets here update, and this was built in Excel, and I show how to do this kind of stuff. And then, I mean, the powerful thing about this is that because you have 9 options in this menu, and you have 15 widgets, it's like buy 15 widgets, get 120 free. Because sum total, that's like the equivalent of 135 widgets there. But I have them all shoehorned into one convenient spot. Then I'll talk about something like this. Now here I only have 9 widgets, but I have 2 drop-downs. So I have one for marketing channels. I absolutely love, I think every dashboard should be segmented by marketing channels and by device category. This is also a newer dimension. I think it also came out in 2013. Critical dimension, because before Google Analytics gave us that dimension, we just had a Boolean value for mobile. Is it mobile? Yes or no? But as most of you probably know, traffic and mobile device visitors on a cell phone behave very differently from visitors on a tablet. Visitors on a tablet typically behave more similarly to desktop. And so there was a lot of junk data in there, and then they gave us a device category dimension, which separates it into 3. So, but because you have 9 options in this dropdown, for this particular, I pulled in, I think, the majority of what most sites would use. And you have 4 options here, because I also have an all option. That's a total of 36 options times 9 widgets, that's buy 9, get 315 widgets free. And it's actually more than 315 because you'll notice down here, see this? This is a little scroll bar. These are showing hours of the day. This breaks down your traffic by hours of the day or in different metrics. And so as you scroll along that scroll bar, then all of those charts update. Otherwise, you would have 24 columns crammed into one little widget. So you're either gonna have to go with like a big ass dashboard, which no one wants to do, or have it go much longer down the page. So it's actually even more than whatever that is, 324. So that's typically where I start, and it's a great place to start. But what I found, oh, and by the way, please do not share this, and I've never done this before, but this is the only conference I'm gonna be doing for 2015, and then I am going dark for the rest of the year because I have projects and I need to get shit done. And when I come back in 2016, after pulling together a really robust reporting framework for your Tango, I'm gonna have more to share. So this is it. So, I mean, if you wanna learn how to build sexy dashboards like that, knock yourself out. But that's not what we're going to be focusing on today. The reason for that is that there are a few key things that I see trip marketers up over and over, and if you don't get these things down, it doesn't matter what you learn. Well, it's not a Boolean, it's not yes or no, but if you don't get, especially if you ignore everything else I say today and you only pay attention to this spot and go back to email, that's fine. I get paid the same whether you listen or not. But this is the most critical element. That is, automate your data collection process. Very few marketing teams do this, and it's been shocking to me. The reason I say this is that as marketers, your boss, whoever that is, your company shouldn't, or maybe your company, shouldn't be paying you to go and get data, like a little gopher. And that's typically what most of us are comfortable with doing. We go to Google Analytics, we export the reports that we want, we bring them into Excel, and then we go to Facebook. If we're working on Facebook, we export, we go into the other report that we might need in our dashboard, we export, we collect them all in a folder. We go to Twitter, we go to Pinterest, we go to SEMrush or Moz, or wherever your data is. We have a host of ad networks. I mean, we have like data spraying at us from so many different sources. And if you're going out and manually collecting this data, that's time that you don't have for analysis. And that's where you need to spend the bulk of your time. And that's why I'm talking about the dark side of dashboarding. This is the part that scares the crap out of marketers. Because we have to talk about APIs. And if we're all honest, when most non-developers hear, well, you can do that with the API, I mean, of course, we save face. We're like, oh, yeah, of course, yeah, I'll look into that. Totally use the API. And inside, you're going, my daughter's here. Shoot! I don't know how to use an API. I'm not a developer, and my developers are busy working on other projects and stuff. And so then you could just kind of like, you kind of go through the grieving process really quickly because you don't have a lot of time. And you're like, what, I really don't need that data anyway. I'll just... and I'm so used to these reports and I have them bookmarked, it's really no problem. So that's been my experience, and that was my personal experience. So I'm gonna share a little bit about my journey to get comfortable with the APIs. I'm gonna be really, really honest with you. This is gonna be a no bullshit presentation here because I want you to know, I'm not a developer. I'm a data person. I could drill through data like a mole through dirt, but you get me in code and stuff, and I mean, it's exciting for a little while, and then I start yawning, and I just want to move on because I want to make data sexy, and code isn't really that sexy, And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the process, and I'm going to use the simplest analogy to try to deconstruct APIs to help you guys get over that intimidation. Because if you can get over the intimidation, then hopefully that will empower you to say, you know what, yeah, let's seriously take a look at automating our data collection process here. So instead of you going and collecting the data and exporting it and doing all that, all APIs do is they bring the data to you. It's like, that's the data. It's like, oh, here I come. I'm just going to float right here. Just tell me where to go. And they populate your dashboards. And when I wake up in the morning, I've set up my dashboards for Your Tango. I've set them up dynamically. I have some that, like, they pull the last 24 hours of data, last 30 days, last 365 days. And when I wake up in the morning, I don't have to press any buttons. I don't have to do anything. It just updates. Or it updates continually. I can check in later in the afternoon and be like, oh, wow, whoa, 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 we have a spike here. Because with Your Tango, the site that I work for, I mean, we hit sampling in a day. And it's highly variable because it's a publisher site. It's a total chick site. I think I'm about to grow a second uterus. It's so chick. I mean, I have pink in my presentation. I mean, anyone who's ever heard me talk before, like, it is not my favorite color. But anyway, but we are rebranding. Anyway, so the APIs bring the data to you. So you decide what data you want to populate your dashboards, and you just hook it up, and then it just is a continual flow. I'm going to talk about a few tools. This is just my personal journey and some of the tools that helped me ease into working with APIs. The first one, Excellent Analytics. This is a really good tool to lose your API virginity on. It's very, very simple. It's an Excel plugin. It's free, so there's no ROI concerns. But there is a caveat. It hasn't been updated in years. So like those 2 dimensions I just told you about, default channel grouping, device category, they're not in there. Nothing new that's coming. You're still going to see visits instead of sessions and things like that. But it gives you an idea, like it shows you, okay, well, what dimensions do you want? And I really hope I don't get your eye. What dimensions do you want? What metrics do you want? What filters do you want to apply? And it's very, very simple. And if you want to learn how to use it, I wrote a blog post on Search Engine Land, and you can check it out. And I'm going to share a bit.ly bundle at the end so you can get all of the links, so you don't have to feverishly write them down. And then from there, I ended up moving to Analytics Canvas, and I demonstrate both of these in the dashboard course. I love Analytics Canvas, absolutely adore it. It's my favorite Google Analytics API tool for several reasons. It also gives you an interface here where you can choose the dimensions and metrics. They update this, like anything that changes in Google Analytics, it's updated within probably like 48 hours, which is amazing, very much unlike Tableau. You will not hear Tableau in my presentation because I'm not a fan. I know a lot of marketers really like Tableau. I do like it on principle, but those 2 dimensions I just told you about that have been around for a couple years, Tableau still hasn't incorporated them. It hasn't incorporated multi-channel funnels. It doesn't incorporate the real-time API. And I just think for that kind of price point, like, come on, guys. I've talked with their sales team, and they go, right, we have no idea what you're talking about, so we're just going to hang up now. Another tool that I really like, Supermetrics. It's super easy. It's a Google Drive plugin, and it also brings in some of the social APIs, so Facebook, YouTube, not Twitter, but this is also a really good tool to get comfortable with APIs. It also pulls in Google Analytics and Google Webmaster Tools, which, good luck getting like search query and top pages data anywhere else. And there are going to be some issues when Google shuts down something in April, but I'm working with them, and hopefully they'll be able to keep that data going. But this is a great, great tool to use. With the tool, the dashboarding tool that we use, which I'll get to in a minute, we have the ability to pull data dynamically from Google Docs. And so as they're updated in the Google Doc, then it's automatically updated in our dashboards. But again, it's a great gateway drug. Okay, so, I have no affiliation with any of these tools, but at your Tango, we ended up going with Clipfolio because my CTO, who's a Stanford guy, has a friend who's a Harvard guy, and the Harvard guy said Clipfolio is the best, so there we go. And it did integrate with most of the tools that we needed, and so we ended up going with it, and so I like it. I like the visualizations. Here's an example of what a dashboard looks like. However, this was a pivotal moment for me because I was tooling around in their documentation trying to learn how to use it, and I came across a little paragraph that scared the shit out of me. And here we go. This is an example of a query URL you may see when using advanced mode. And simple mode for Google Analytics is, like, forget it. I mean, unless you just want sessions and maybe bounce rate or something, you can't use the simple mode. And I was like, whoa. What? Query URL? Like, they listed, oh, we have native integration with all of these tools. So I'm thinking native integration means I have an interface to work with, like Analytics Canvas or Excellent Analytics, not freaking query URLs. But at this point, we were already invested, and so I had to put on my big girl pants and really start to get more comfortable with APIs and digging through API documentation. But I'll tell you, this was my initial reaction to the CTO, because I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. I just told him, I was like, I don't have developer support. None of our developers know how to work with APIs, and they suffer from a deplorable lack of curiosity if they did know, you know? And so, I mean, I'm like on my own with this. But I moved forward in spite of, like, you know, looking at, this is an example API query URL. I mean, that's ridiculous. We are marketers. We are not developers. Like, no one should be expecting this of us. However, by the end of this presentation, this is going to make sense to you. Okay, so I'm going to use an analogy to help break this down. And it did occur to me, though, while I was on the plane coming here, I was like, because I'm using hot dogs as the analogy, and I'm like, I've never been to Portland, but upon further consideration, hot dogs might not have been the best example. But so, don't judge me, you hippie freaks. No, just kidding. I love Portland. But we're using hot dogs, so you might have to hurl afterwards. But let's say that I own a hot dog chain, and our restaurant, it just sells hot dogs. We have restaurants all over the country, and we decide that we're going to build a simple API to just keep track of our data and to route it to our dashboard tool. And I'm going to break this down for you in the simplest of terms. So first off, you're going to have a URL, because your API just lives somewhere on the internet. Like, somewhere on the internet, just picture like a giant Excel spreadsheet just collecting your data and sending it back to you. So it has to have a home. And so this is the beginning of an API query. Then from here, sometimes you have revision control, like a version number. You'll see this with the Facebook API. And then after that, you decide, okay, well, what do you want to measure? So then you just have your metrics that you want to measure. So let's say I want to measure revenue, margin, and total orders. Now, I typically wouldn't want all of this in one chart, but one thing I've learned, because APIs kind of throttle themselves, because they don't really want you wasting a bunch of their resources pulling data. So if you can combine API requests into one request, it can help you with some API limitations. So what you're doing is you're trying to build out like a data set, and I might build 3 or 4 visualizations from this data dump. But let's just say I want to know revenue, margin, and total orders. So those are our metrics. Then from there, you have to know, how do you want to segment the data? Because typically you don't just want a whole bunch of aggregated data. So with segmenting, you just think, okay, I want this measured by what? By date. How do you want it broken down? By date, by state, by city. You know, if you picture a chart, like these metrics here, these are going to be like your individual lines in a line chart or your individual columns in a column chart. And then the segmentation, let's say I went with state, city, and date. These are going to be what goes along the x-axis. You know, so if you're breaking it down by date, you might have all the dates for the past year along the x-axis, or you might have a breakdown of states or whatever. But that's what you're doing. These are metrics, and if we did this for Google Analytics, these would be dimensions these would be metrics, and these would be dimensions. So, but now let's say you want to slice and dice your data. So typically, as Rachel was mentioning, you wanted to answer a question. You need to figure out what question do we want to answer. So you're going to use these field value pairs, and you'll typically have a query parameter equal a value. So let's say we start with a hot dog. And you want to know first off, you want to break it down by what type of hot dogs. So let's say you serve turkey, beef, and tofu. I'm sure the tofu hot dogs would be a big hit here. No one would touch them in New Jersey, where I'm from. But let's say, okay, I just want to know how turkey dogs are performing across our different restaurants. Well, then you would say, okay, type equals turkey. Now let's say you want to, you prep your hot dogs 2 different ways. Sometimes you split them, sometimes you do them whole. That could be another key value pair, prep equals split or prep equals whole. So if I just wanted to break it down by split, how many split hot dogs do we sell? And of course, this is ridiculous. This is intentionally a ridiculous example, but I would just have an ampersand there, and I would say prep equals split. If I wanted to know both, then you could do something like maybe the prep equals all or prep equals split and whole. And then you'll always have some kind of date dimension. And all the APIs that I've worked with will let you hard code dates, but typically, especially if you're building this out for dashboards, you don't want to hard code dates. You want them to be dynamic. So this is just what Clipfolio uses, but it will be since and until, and then this just gives me the last 365 days, so the last year of data, and it will update every day. So that's what a typical API query URL looks like. But let's say you get into it, and this is speaking from experience, you get stuck on something. There is help. So for the Google Analytics tool, they have a query builder. This is very, very, very helpful in building out queries because you can kind of test things here and see like what the format is supposed to look like. There's also another tool that I forgot to put in here that Google Analytics does. I use it so much that I have the bit.ly memorized, but it's just bit.ly / so bit.ly / API-help. And that gives you a breakdown of the web names that you see inside Google Analytics and the API naming conventions, which at times are very, very different. Facebook also has an API Explorer. I will warn you, this is very difficult to use. It took me, I love Jonathan, totally representing Facebook. Yeah, if the Facebook API, the documentation is, you can tell, it is written for developers who are building out API apps. Like if you're a marketer and you want to ping their servers all day, you know, hitting them up for data, they're like, all right, well, good luck. Good luck figuring out how, but it took me the longest time, I would say probably at least 2 hours, just to even figure out how to start it. So pay attention, if you ever want to hit up the Facebook API, pay attention to what's highlighted in yellow. It will get you started. Just start with whatever your page name is, because it has like $me equals and ID equals blah, 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 and you're like, what the hell? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, and there are no visual cues. Like, hey, start with this, try this. I mean, you are really on your own. But you do have an API Explorer. SEMrush. These guys, their documentation is to kill for. Their documentation is so, so good. And I think it's because like they actually want you to access data, so you could tell it's written much more for marketers than like an app developer. But they, they have the breakdown of all their dimensions and stuff, but then they have an example query URL, which is unbelievably helpful, and they give you an example of what your data will look like for that particular API query, for every single API call. It is awesome. I love those guys. Okay, another good tool, going back to SEMpdx, if you try to do an API call and it's just not working, what I do now is I'll go into SEMpdx and I'll try to put those metrics and dimensions together, and it will tell you, this won't work, idiot, because you need a time dimension if you're using unique viewers. And then I go back and I try it again, Xing out unique viewers, and then run it, and if I get data, I'm like, done. And I go back into Clipfolio and I run the query again. Okay, a real world example using Facebook. Your API query is going to start with this if you're using the graph object. And then you're going to add your, whatever your page is. I'm using the insights object, whatever. It just tells you that your data lives in this directory on the Facebook site. And then here are my metrics that I called. I wanted page impressions for organic and paid. And then this is the period, and you have the option of day, week, days 28, which is supposed to be kind of like a month, and then lifetime for a few metrics. I almost always use the day option. And then you just say how long. And again, this is going to be specific to whatever system you use, but this is going to pull my page impressions for organic and paid for the last 90 days every day. It's just going to update every day. And then I have like a sexy chart that I track that with. Okay, you can learn more about that there. All right, next up, have a daily dashboard. This is really important. Now, I'm not a big fan of Google Analytics dashboards. They're very, very limiting. However, I use them as a petri dish before I bring things into Clipfolio. And I have one data where I have one dashboard where I just monitor all this historical data and look for like big spikes or big drops. And then I'll point that out to my editorial team. Whoa, this was the second highest day from Facebook in the history of your Tango. Woohoo, drinks on me. And then I have another dashboard where I just look at the previous day. Again, just this past week, I was like, whoa, holy hell, this one page had so many more page views than everything else. And then I dig in and I find out what happened. In this particular instance, the traffic came from Zergnet, which is a content aggregator we use, focuses on celebrity news. And I just dug and dug. And I mean, this is risky, but like I said, this is my testing petri dish where, if I'm testing something and it breaks or the insights aren't very interesting, I just delete the dashboard and I don't spend a lot of time doing the API stuff. And then I have other dashboards that I just use for research for when I get those spikes. And this dashboard here showed me, oh, okay, yeah, the Zergnet traffic really, really liked this post we had about 50 Shades of Grey. And there's a reason I had to blur out most of those URLs. They were very Cosmo-esque. Okay, last up, be flexible on the format. I would not have touched on this point before I came to Your Tango, but I'm working with all editors. They are not numbers people, they are not data people, and so I got us all set up in Clipfolio, and I had insights, and I had sexy dashboards and stuff. I couldn't even get them to log in. I would send them an email. Anytime I mentioned Clipfolio, I'd be like, oh, by the way, here are the login credentials. No one ever logged in. They didn't need it. They didn't care. So I've never done this for a client, but I was like, okay, then you're not going to go to the dashboard, then I'm bringing it to you. So every week, I send out an email with a list of what's up and what's down, what has moved really well, and if there's something that's like really, really outrageous, I highlight it in red, and I give links to each of the reports, and they go to it, and they're like so into it. And I would have never, ever thought to do that before. Also, titrate data into everything. Every email I send out, just about, I have links to reports, so I'm trying to get them used to working with data and thinking in terms of data. Last up, align with your branding. So branding is huge right now, and companies spend a lot of money. I mean, just logos alone. So Pepsi, they did a redesign of their logo, $1 million. The BBC, Freaking A. Those are 3 black boxes with white text. $1.8 million. I missed my calling. Accenture, that is ugly as hell. $100 million. This one, Symantec. $1.3 billion. But then look at the visualizations that I see for some of these companies that spend lots and lots of money on branding, have beautiful brands. I'm just like, this stuff, it's just awful. Don't use 3D for anything. I am going to pick on one particular brand, the Department of Justice. Beautiful, beautiful branding, right? I mean, that just screams testosterone and power. You know, you're talking dark gray and gold. I found this chart, no lie, on their site. There's the URL, you can check it out. And I was like, are you kidding me? Their budget is like, I think it's like $26 billion, something like that a year. I mean, like, you could pay an intern. You could send them a link to my video tutorial on how to do charts, and they would do something better than all the default options you get in Excel. So what I decided to do was take that chart, and clean it up a bit. And so I'm going to very quickly go through the steps I went through. First off, okay, get rid of repetition. Right, got it. These are fiscal years. And who brings the values into the axis? Axes are supposed to be labels. So I got rid of those. Then, as you can see here, then get rid of grid lines. Hate them, hate them, hate them. Then we really don't need this over here, this axis, because this is such a simple chart. But first I have to bring these values into the columns, and then I can get rid of that. And then see this line here? If you're bringing it into a dashboard, this just causes the eye to trip. No need to have it there. Got rid of that. Last up, apply your branding. Boom. All right, if you want to learn how to create charts like that, I have this video tutorial. It takes you by the hand. And all of my bit.ly links can be found at bit.ly/searchfestannie.